Let's bring in columnist for the Daily Beast, David Rothkopf. He's the author of the book American Resistance, the inside story of how the deep state saved the nation. Also, professor of history at New York University, Ruth Ben-Ghiat. She's the author of the book Strong Men, Mussolini to the President. Good morning to you both. David, I'll start with your piece. You write this: Brazil is just the latest victim of the global fascism virus. You write, the reason the carbon copy insurrection was not shocking is that the two are so clearly and intimately related. Bolsonaro, you write, has long been a Trump imitator and wannabe. The two have long expressed support for one another. As happened in the U.S., advisors close to Trump, such as Steve Bannon, spread the idea that Bolsonaro supporters should contest any election result that did not favor him. Watching these scenes unfold and watching the response of the Brazilian government should have been not only eerily familiar for American audiences, but frankly uncomfortable. Because even if the current outbreak of the right-wing authoritarian virus did not originate in the U.S., the U.S. is a super spreader, guilty of both failing to contain the spread of this political plague and of accelerating and enabling its virulence. So, David, what other parallels do you see here between January 6th? Steve Bannon definitely was pushing a lot of this in Brazil. We heard some of the same rhetoric about patriots storming the Capitol building and everything that comes with that. Very, very familiar language to what we heard before January 6th.
Yeah, it's hard not to see parallels here. The pictures look the same, the crowds, the mobs, the tear gas, the destruction within the Capitol. Of course, the Brazilian mob also went into the Supreme Court and into the presidential palace. But this is all part of a bigger movement. It's a part of a global movement that's one of the real challenges of our time. It emanates, I think, originally out of Moscow, but in country after country, there have been efforts to dilute or deconstruct democracy, and this, goes from Asia, Modi in India, to Brazil with Bolsonaro, to Orban in Europe. And what is troubling is that typically in these kind of situations, as you discussed in the last hour, the United States stands up and is the defender of democracy. But days before, hours before this attack that took place in Brasilia, what did we see? We saw coup defenders, election deniers, elevated in the U.S. House of Representatives. Kevin McCarthy was the first person to embrace Donald Trump after the coup. Donald Trump is the leading Republican candidate. So for those Brazilians who were thinking, let's go and undertake this attack, the message from the United States is coup plotters are rewarded. They're not held accountable. They continue to be able to advance their message. It works. And that's something we really, really need to look at hard, because this is one of the great challenges of our moment in history.
So, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, your thoughts on this? Obviously, there are parallels in the execution of this riot, but also clear connections. Steve Bannon and others in Trump world have kind of promoting something like this in the months leading up to it. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think this is, we have to see the GOP, and it's sobering to do this, as an autocratic party led, by someone with a personality cult, Donald Trump, just like Bolsonaro. And they're not only out to wreck democracy at home, they are now embedded and enmeshed in these far-right networks that stretch from Moscow to Budapest. Remember, Orban speaks at CPAC. He's their mentor in all things autocratic, to Brasilia. And so it's very important to have this frame. And the difference in Brazil, of course, is that Brazil had a 21-year bloody military dictatorship that started with a coup. And, it only ended in 1985. So millions of Brazilians lived through this, and they know that people were tortured and disappeared. So you're seeing a very different reaction by the Lula government, but we will see more there's a reason that the governor of Brasilia was suspended for 90 days immediately. A third of my book is about coups, and a mantra about coups I've developed is some must act and others must stand down to let the operation proceed. So you always have dereliction of duty among conspirators. So we're going to see, who was responsible for the police being outnumbered, and we'll find out much more about that. But the reason that the government will have such a stern response is that they have a coup in their past.
So, Gene Robinson, Brazil had its own January 6th on a January 8th, and you write for the Washington Post a piece entitled "America's Trumpist Export to Brazil, Election Denialism." And expand on that, if you will, and just weigh in as to how America is now viewed across the world, where this is now what we are known for, a riot like this at our seat of democracy that we now see emulated other places. And how does that perhaps empower our enemies abroad?
Well, look, it's incredible. I mean, we think of ourselves as the beacon of democracy. We think of ourselves as trying to export democracy across the world, and president after president. You can go back to John Kennedy, and every president talks about democracy as the ideal, as what we hope for the world. This ability to self-determination and freedom and liberty, and instead, in this case, what we exported was our January 6th. We exported, Brazil, the Bolsonaro supporters and Bolsonaro himself followed the Donald Trump playbook. Bolsonaro began saying before the election that the election would be rigged against him if he lost, and that was the mantra. That was what he encouraged his supporters to believe. He refused to acknowledge his loss. He refused to concede, and he allowed his defenders and his supporters to continue this drumroll of lies. It was a free and fair election. Every observer agrees it was a close election, but Lula won. And Bolsonaro, by not acknowledging that and by actively and tacitly encouraging his supporters to deny the election, it led inexorably to January 8th in Brasilia. It's incredible, really, to watch, just to sit there at home and watch what was happening on Sunday in Brasilia, a city I know well because I covered it. I spent a lot of time there, and to realize that it happened here first. That we provided the example. We showed how to try to stage a coup. Fortunately, it was unsuccessful in Brazil, as it was unsuccessful here. But the danger remains. Those Bolsonaristas are still out there.
The danger remains, and David Rothkopf, the danger remains, especially when you look at some of the people who made Kevin McCarthy Speaker of the House. You have House Republicans, not conservatives. I'll just say it. I'm a conservative. I actually, you and I have disagreed on many things. We disagreed on the Iran nuclear deal, I think quite vehemently. I would guess we disagreed on the Church Commission. I campaigned against, the excesses, I said, of the Church Commission. I know that horrifies a lot of people. I always wanted a stronger military. I say all this to compare what Reagan conservatives, what Thatcher conservatives were compared to these group of people who haven't found an institution they don't want to tear down, who hate our U.S. military, who says it's too woke, say they wish we were more like the Russian military. Can you believe senators are saying that? They attack the intel community, at war with the intel community. They attack the FBI, say the FBI is coming after people who voted for Trump, saying the helicopters that we used in Afghanistan we're now going to use against Trump supporters here. They attack healthcare officials. You look at the numbers for those who took COVID vaccines, those who did not, and yet they fight their fights on Twitter. It's not even a close call. You have the most senior Republican senator, forgive me for going on, but it needs to be said, saying that the IRS is going to small business owners and families in Iowa with AR-15s and kicking down their front door. This nihilism now runs the House of Representatives because the very people who said defund the FBI and were the most extreme were the very people that put Kevin McCarthy over the top. So we've exported a lot of that to Brazil. And unfortunately, we're importing our ideas from Orban, from Putin, from other autocrats. So what's the way forward? How much danger are we in over the next 2 years?
Well, I think the first step is to call it what it is. There were commentators last week who would refer to people around McCarthy as the conservatives in the House or the moderates in the House. And as you point out, they weren't conservatives. They weren't moderates. These are nihilists. These are, as Ruth just said, these are authoritarians. And we have to distinguish between the reasonable policy debates we once had in the past and the fact that these people are systematically trying to destroy the institutions of the United States government. Look at the actions they took just yesterday. They want to eliminate the Ethics Committee. They want to go after the Justice Department. That may seem like they're trying to defend themselves, but what is it trying to do? It's trying to give a free pass to authoritarians. They don't want to fund the support for Ukraine. What does that do? That helps the leader of this authoritarian movement worldwide, Vladimir Putin, try to impose his will in an illegal war in Ukraine. They embrace Orban. This is a pernicious party. This is a dangerous political movement in the United States. And if we dress it up, we will bear the cost of normalizing what is extremely dangerous and a threat to literally the values we hold most dear in the United States of America.